Hi, it's Mark Galliotti with another short opinion vlog on Russian politics. Now, today in the New York Times, they ran an op.ed piece by the Russian dissident journalist Oleg Kashin, in which he drew some really, for me, quite striking and surprising parallels between Navalny and Putin, essentially looking at Navalny's well-known, slightly authoritarian tendencies and more or less drawing that direct link. Well, first of all, seriously. This is a fairly meaningless connection to say, well, he surrounds himself with people who basically either work for him or who are faintly yes men. That does not actually directly map across to being a kleptocratic authoritarian dictator who has his enemies murdered, who fights bloody, brutal wars to maintain the territorial integrity of the Russian Federation in Chechnya, who extends that Russian Federation into neighbouring countries, and who basically launches a global political war to reshape the international order. I think we have to accept that there is more than a little bit of open ground between those two positions. But more broadly, and let's be perfectly honest, I have a great deal of respect for Oleg Kashin. He has more than earned his right, not just to his own opinion, but for us to actually take his opinion seriously, which is why I actually did want to respond to it. 3 brief points. The first one is, look, this is not about a choice of dictators. Navalny himself does not certainly speak to and seem to be trying to just simply become the next Putin. Though, on that point, if I had to have a choice between Putin or Navalny in the Kremlin, I know who I'd vote for. But rather, Navalny is clearly about restructuring the entire Russian political system. Now, of course, I'm sure he has dreams and hopes of where he'd want to be. But let's be honest, what politician who gets involved in serious politics does not have those fantasies? Who actually says, I'm aiming for something in the middle? So, he wants, I'm sure, to become president one day. But the point is, what kind of a president? The president of an authoritarian dictatorial state, or the elected president of a democratic, rules-based one? It's very clear that the latter is the case. Secondly, and this is if you're trying to not just lead, but build a political movement virtually from scratch, well, of course that's going to involve, first of all, some compromises. Sometimes you're going to actually have to hold opinions or express opinions that you might not entirely believe. Secondly, it's going to often involve oversimplifications. For example, characterising the entire government as equally stupid and corrupt, when in fact, yes, maybe as an administrative system on the whole, it is indeed fairly stupid and deeply, deeply corrupt. But nonetheless, there are clearly gradations within it. But the point is, that kind of nuance doesn't necessarily play well in platform politics. But thirdly, look, it does tend to require some kind of a leader figure. Now, here's the interesting thing. In the West, so often the leaders are in fact pygmies who have armies of spin doctors and media managers to hold up lenses in front of them so that they appear like giants to the rest of us. In Navalny, we have a figure who clearly has, considerable charisma, considerable degrees of willpower and determination, but also, I would suggest, enough of a moral compass. Look, I'm not going to say that every single one of his views totally accords with Western liberal values. Well, no, we know about some of the racist notions that he's espoused. But even then, we're talking about racism rather than institutionalized racism. There's no sense, for example, that he believes that non-Russians should not have exactly the same legal protections as everyone else. So anyway, we have a charismatic leader, and like it or not, that is going to be absolutely crucial in not just building, but maintaining this political movement. Because this is not about 6 months or 12 months. It's going to be more like years. There was never any real thought that Navalny was likely to be able to stand in the 2018 presidential elections. Navalny is basically building a platform so that when the next elections come, the post-Putin elections, he's in a strong position. And the final point is, why? If you have qualms about Navalny, that's fine. If you want to express those qualms, okay. But why not only make a big splash of it? Because the New York Times is, after all, one of the globe's great newspapers of record. But also, why do it in these terms? And yet Kashin knows full well what the Putin state is about. And whatever else he may feel about Navalny, I really don't think he believes that Navalny is dispatching assassins as we speak to silence him as a critic or anything like that. The Russian opposition face quite extraordinary challenges and threats. From how to get the message out in the country when you're basically denied TV access, when increasingly the state is trying to control the internet, etc. And basically when people are understandably tired of politics and cynical. All the way through to the much more vicious and often kinetic means that the Kremlin uses, which Kashin himself has experienced, in trying to silence anyone who is at all critical. In that context, to draw this comparison at a time when, frankly, it's difficult to maintain momentum in the outside world, to actually pay attention to Russia and pay attention to the positive signs that there are Russians who want Russia to be a different kind of country. These are the people we ought to be fighting and defending, not necessarily uncritically. I'm not saying that Navalny is beyond any kind of critique, but let us do so carefully, consciously, and with nuance. So many times, the story of Russian political opposition has been a story of vicious infighting that ensures that no one ever actually gets to do the things they wanted to do. That was in part one of the stories of the Bolotnaya protests of 2011-2012. I hope we are not going to see the same kind of fratricidal cannibalism destroy yet another hope of democratic reform in Russia. So on that note, I'll end. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I've been Mark Galeotti.